About a few weeks ago, I went with a client to interview a property management company. My client had dealt with quite a few property management companies and had a pretty tough go with a few of them. So I went along to partake in the interview process, and I thought I would write down and then talk about the main things that I look for in a property management company. And there's 3 areas of property management that I kind of ask the most questions about. Leasing, which has to do with, vacancies beginning and end. Maintenance, reports, and then the last, which is the bonus part, is staffing, which is vital to the whole operation, and I think is what causes the most problems with property owners is their property management company is understaffed. So I'm just going to go right into it, starting with leasing. Leasing to me is beginning and end. So it's from the moment that the tenant gives their notice to the day you put in a new tenant. What is the procedures? How do they handle it? So it should be, when you get a 30-day notice usually, how do you handle that? Then once the unit is given back, what are your next steps? And then usually that should actually involve, if the unit needs to be rehabbed, what is the order that you do? Do you send the vendor out? Do you get the bid so that the owner can see it? What is that procedure? And then leasing. What is your next steps on leasing? What is the criteria that you use to vet applicants? And then how do you do the move-in? Those are things that you want to talk about and have an in-depth conversation with the property management company that you might hire. How do you handle that? The next thing is maintenance. Maintenance is really key. It's like the biggest part of property management. It is what's kind of the rise and fall of property management is maintenance, how efficiently it's done. So you want to know, one of the main things that you have with a property management company is usually the accessibility to multiple vendors. So you'll want to know from your property management company, how many vendors do you have in any particular area? So you usually want them to have access to a few handymen, a few plumbers, a few electricians, a few roofers, maybe some landscapers. Those are kind of the main ones. Those are the main things that come up. So you want to see that they have multiple vendors in each of those categories. And the reason being, if something comes up and a vendor is unavailable, you want them to have backup vendors to be able to address an issue if it's kind of like an emergency. Or the other vendor is just really busy, so you want to make sure that they have someone else available. As far as maintenance and the vendor side, that's important. Another thing is you want to know what their maintenance record keeping is like. From the moment that they either get an inspection report or a tenant notification that they need to have maintenance, what is the steps? How do they handle it? What is their typical turnaround time from the time they're on notice to the time that the work order is usually closed? How fast do they do those? What's the typical turnaround? Some things, aren't urgent, so you can take some time, but other things, are pretty urgent. And you don't want repairs that are non-urgent to take longer, usually than 30 days. They should be done much sooner than that. So you want to get an idea of what their maintenance is like, how they handle those things, how they document them. I'm assuming, they should have someone, if the vendor goes in, they should be trained to take photos of what it was that they're fixing, photos of it after, to keep track of the receipts, if they had to pay for anything or buy anything, invoices for the actual repair. So you want to keep that all together and make sure that the management company has that kept all together. Another really, really key and important thing is reports. You want to know what reports you're expected to get and how soon you're going to get them. Usually you should get them monthly, and the report should be an income statement, which is sometimes also called the P&L. So it's the income coming in, expenses going out. You'll want an expense ledger, so the expenses that went out that month. A check register if things were paid by check, who the checks were made to, how much, what's the corresponding bill that they go to. You'll want a rent roll with the names of the current tenants, any possible vacancies that are in the portfolio at the building, and what the rent is for them. The rent roll will have sometimes the market rent. So if there's a vacancy, you can see kind of what the market rent is or what you're expecting to get. And then the property management company almost always has a bank account specifically for each building. So you'll get usually a bank statement for the property. Those are the main things that you want to get in an owner report. Usually they can be customized, so if you want other things, like I want to report about work orders, I want to see, any photos that were taken of the property, those can probably be asked. Sometimes they're excessive, they might not be necessary, but if that's the case and you want those, that should be made available to you to inspect. And one of my biggest pet peeves with property management companies is that they're understaffed. So key things that I like to ask and dig a little into is how many people do you have on hand? what's your staff, usually an office staff, and how many units do you have? So if they have, over 1,000 units, you're gonna wanna have quite a few people on hand to help, because there's just a lot of work between paying bills every month, taking tenant phone calls, dealing with inspection reports. The city might have an inspection report, or if you have Section 8 tenants, those usually every month. There's some sort of unit that comes up for their annual inspection. So you want to make sure that they have enough people on hand to handle not only your portfolio, but all the units that they're responsible for. And the thing with property management companies that I tend to see is not many people just set up a property management company. Usually people have their own property and then they start to manage other people's real estate. Their portfolios always usually take precedent over yours. Not that they can't also handle yours, but it usually is they had their portfolio first, they were managing it, and they thought, you know what, I could take on other units, I could take on other business. And sometimes it's also to help facilitate, if there's a syndication or partners that come together, usually the management company is to also facilitate group investments. So that's sometimes how those usually come to be, they form. Sometimes they form by accident, sometimes people intentionally open property management companies. And that being said, you're gonna wanna get an idea of their experience. How long have you been managing real estate? And what kind of real estate do you manage? Some management companies, they only handle SFRs, single family residences. So they only manage houses. Some people only deal in multifamily. Some people only deal in commercial. And some deal with all three. Single family residences, multifamily, and commercial. Commercial meaning warehouses, office space, retail. Space is not meant for habitable dwelling. I consider that commercial. Those different kinds of real estate requiring completely different sets of parameters usually are subject to slightly different rules. So if you have commercial real estate, you're going to probably want to find someone who's experienced with commercial real estate or understands what you're doing. Someone who manages single family residences might not be familiar with commercial, and so they might not be a good fit. So you want to make sure that they have enough experience that they can handle what you're bringing to the table and have, a very frank conversation about that. Those are the main things that I look for. There's always a ton of things that you could come up with on your own that maybe you've had an experience in the past that you don't want to repeat again. So there might be very specific points that you have that you wanted to go over with a property management company. But leasing, maintenance, owner reports, and just overall having enough staff are very, very critical things, and the most critical things that I see and I like to question about to assess if a property management company is going to be a good fit and they're going to be able to sufficiently handle the real estate that they're being given. So if you have a property management company or you're looking into a property management company, those are some questions that you might want to ask. Those are topics you might want to get into. If you're looking to hire a property management company, you might want to write out a list of questions that you have and kind of go over them or make sure that they get addressed during the interview process. And that being said, hopefully this video was very helpful for you. And if you have real estate and you need help managing it, which almost everybody does, I wish you the best of luck in finding a suitable property management company. Thanks.